Alright, so now in this part we're going to finally add our second enemy, but we've set a bunch of stuff up to help make this process easier. So what we're going to do is I'm going to start by creating sprite, of course, because I need a sprite. So I'm going to right click, create sprite, and we're going to create SPR enemy 2. Okay, this is also part of our sprite sheet, so I'm going to go ahead and click edit image, and click the image menu, and click, well, not import images. I meant to do import strip image. There we go. And we're going to use the sprite sheet from my Game 3 assets. Same sprite sheet we've been using. I'm going to zoom in to show you which sprites we're going to use. We're going to use this thin ship here. These little ships, they only shoot one. So they're right here. So if I click here, I should see 128 as my vertical pixel offset. But you'll notice these are thinner than the other ships, and that's because they're going to be, they're only 16 pixels wide instead of 32. So we're still doing 4 frames and 4 per row, but our frame width is only 16, while our pixel height, our frame height, is still 32. And then as long as my vertical pixel offset's 128, I should be okay. I'm going to click convert, answer yes, and I have my strip image pulled in. I just need to remove the background from each frame. Okay, and now that I have that, I can click close, and I can make sure I click the middle center for the origin. So, speaking of the origin, we're going to be shooting a laser from this one, and I'll go back into edit image to show you. So the origin is going to be at 816, which is this pixel right here. We want to fire from here, which is 825. So it's not only 9 pixels down from where we're at. We'll leave the horizontal the same and just move down in order to shoot when we actually do the laser. So, and we're only firing one laser. But I'm just putting that in our brain so that when we actually create the object and start making it shoot, we're going to go ahead and do that now. But we'll know which one, like how we want to do that. So obj enemy 2 for the new enemy, for the new enemy's object, I should say. Add the sprite enemy 2, or associate the sprite enemy 2 with it, and we'll start adding events. In the create event, just like with our enemy 1, we are going to assign a number of hits. In this case, the number of hits we're going to assign is 5. So this one's going to be a little bit harder to hit, or I shouldn't say harder to hit. Well, it is. It's going to be smaller. But it's also not going to require, it's going to require more hits than the other enemy. To offset that, we are going to make the offset that, we're going to make this enemy move slower. So our enemy 2 moves at 2 pixels per step. We're going to move at 1 pixel per step. That way it's moving slower, a little bit, make it easier to try and kill while it's still on the screen, because it has 5 hits. And then we're also going to go ahead and set an alarm for this enemy. Now, this enemy, because it's of how we decided how this enemy is going to be in our game design document, we actually said that this enemy is going to constantly fire, and that's just how it is. So we are going to set the alarm countdown for 120, and then we're going to go ahead and add the collision event the alarm event to actually shoot. And in this case, because we're not shooting when the player's in front of us only, we're shooting at all times. We're just going to create an instance of the player or the enemy laser. Remember to click both relative boxes. And then, as I said, for horizontally, we're going to leave it at 0. We're just going to move 9 pixels down. So I'm just going to put a 9 in for Y, make sure both boxes are clicked as relative, and then we'll restart the alarm countdown for 120. Okay. That will that'll have the enemy shoot at all times with 120 steps in between. If that turns out to be not quick enough, then we'll adjust that. So, but we're also going to have this enemy appear in a larger group and always in the center. However, we're only going to have them appear in every fifth group. So every fifth time that we generate a group, we're going to have this be the group that's generated. That's kind of a regular thing that the player could expect, although it may look interesting to the player because it may not appear that it's like all the groups might not be off, the 4 groups might not be off the screen before, well, they will be off the screen, but the next groups will start coming while this group of enemies is on the screen. So here we go. We're going to do that now. Or we're going to do some more with this object, I should say. What we need to do is we need to address some of the other things that happen to the enemy. So first of all, I'm going to go to the player laser, and we already know that the enemy 1 laser, like we already have a collision with the player or the enemy 1 object. I'm going to right click and duplicate that event for the enemy 2 object. And as long as I have named, I keep this consistent, that should be fine. Like, it should work just fine. The only other thing that we need to do in the player, or in this object, is add the step event. Well, I guess we got to do a couple more things. Add the step event to check if hits have reduced below 0. So, if variable hits less than or equal to 0, because if that's the case, then we need to destroy this enemy. So we need to do 2 things, of course. One, we need to add to player score. So set global variable player score. And then the value is going to be 10, and click relative. All our enemies are 10, regardless of whether they're the enemy 1, enemy 2. It just makes it consistent. And then, of course, we need to destroy this object, or this instance. And then we need to add their health bar. So the health bar, so it's in draw. I'm adding the draw event. And then, of course, I'm going to add draw self to this. And then we'll add the draw health bar. But one thing I want to note is that we're going to use all the same values from enemy 1. So we are going to go to the enemy 1 object real quick and take a look at the draw event. So we won't use the same value, obviously, because the OBJ enemy 2 has 5 hits instead of 3. But all of these values will be exactly the same. So negative 12, negative 22, 12, and negative 20. So back to enemy 2. Our value for hits, or for the health bar, is hits times 20 because we have 5 hits. And then if you remember our values, negative 12, clicking all relative boxes, negative 22, 12, and negative 20. And I know that this sprite is half the width of the enemy 2 or enemy 1 sprite. That doesn't matter. It's not going to affect anything. It just keeps it consistent. So, choosing all the same colors. So dark gray for the background, white for the outline. Minimum color is red, maximum color is green. I think that's it. So when we look at enemy 1, enemy 2, we should have all the same sorts of things. The difference, of course, being that we're not shooting the same way that we are with the player, or with the enemy 1. Enemy 2 is just shooting all the time. Now we need to make the enemy actually appear. So what we're going to do is go to the OBJ control, and we can set ourselves up for later on by adding a global variable that we'll call group count. In this way, we can do 2 things. One, we can keep track of how many groups we've had so far, and then every 5th group make enemy 2 appear. But also we can use this later on to have waves appear, and then consider a wave done after so many groups have come through. And if the player survives that wave, that's what really matters. It's surviving rather than having to hit a certain number of points or whatever. And then we can decide after those waves to get bonuses and things like that. So let's we're going to just use the same event though, or the same alarm, I should say. So we still have the alarm countdown to 120. I'm going to go to the alarm 0 event, and let's take a look. So we have all this stuff in here for adding the groups of enemy 1. Okay? And rather than randomly make enemy 2 appear, as I said, we're going to have the enemy appear every 5th group. Okay? So the way we're going to do that is we're going to, we need to change every time we have this alarm trigger, we need to change the group count by 1. So set global variable for group count, 1, and relative. And then we're going to check and see if the group count value is divisible by 5. And there's a mathematical function called modulo that does this. So what a modulo is the remainder when you divide a number by some other number. So for group count, for group count, we're going to use an if expression, and I'm going to say global dot group count mod 5 equals 0. So let me go through this real quick. I'm going to extend this so we can see it. Okay, so the way modulo works is it divides whatever number I have over here by this number over here. So in this case, we'll take group count, divide it by 5. There will be some remainder. That remainder will be 0, 1, 2, 3, or 4. That's the only 4, 5 values it could be. Because if I divide group count by 5, that's the only possible remainders, because those are all numbers less than 5. Okay? So now, if modulo group count mod 5 is 0, that would mean that whatever group count is divisible by 5. So that means if that's true, then what we want to go ahead and make our enemy 2s appear. Right? And in this case, well, for our enemy 2s, we're going to make them, we're going to make them appear in a group of 5 in a V formation. Okay? And right down the middle. So here's what we're going to do. I'm going to go ahead and just add all my create instances now, and then we'll go through one at a time and figure them out. So for each one, it's going to be an enemy 2. And I'm not clicking any of the relative boxes because we're going to pick the exact spaces for them. Okay, so let's do that right now. So I'm going to do the middle one first, and then the 2 on next to him, and the 2 next to him. And the way we're going to set it up is put the middle one in the middle, front one in the middle, so room width divided by 2, and then we'll start him where we start all the other leaders of the groups, which is 16 pixels above the top of the screen. So negative 16 for Y. For the next 2 enemies, we're going to scoot them over by 32, but only up by 16. So that means that we're going to go room width divided by 2, and I'm putting this in parentheses just to ensure that it happens first. And then we're going to subtract 32. This will be the guy on the left. And then we're going to we'll do negative 32 because that's 16 up from Y. Okay? And then on the other side, this is the other guy flanking. So parentheses room underscore width divided by 2 plus 32. And then negative 32 here as well. Finally, we are going to do the last 2, which will be room width divided by 2 minus 64, and then minus 48, or negative 48 for y. And then we'll mirror image this one, room underscore width divided by 2 minus, or plus 64, I should say. Okay. And then I almost forgot. Well, hold on, I gotta finish this, and then we'll get to what I almost forgot. Now, otherwise, so we don't always want the other enemies to appear. We don't want a group of enemy 1s to appear at the same time that enemy 2 is. So let's go ahead and leave the randomize out of it. So I might move the randomize up to the top here. I might have to zoom out to do that. So we'll move the randomize up to the top just to make it play it safe. And then everything else we're going to put inside an else. Well, I shouldn't say everything else, but the stuff that creates the groups of enemy 2, we're going to put inside, or enemy 1, I should say. We're going to put inside. So everything but this one, these two here. This is for the actual alarm countdown. So we're going to go ahead and fix that, or leave those out, I should say. So scroll up, get an else. I'm going to scroll up here. Else is going to go here, above the choose, and then I'm going to take the choose and the 3 create instances, and we're going to put them inside the else. That way, a group of enemies appears every time we add to group count, or every time this alarm goes off, and then we'll still randomly generate a new group, or new wait time, I should say, for the new group. What I almost forgot though was for the player. When the player runs into enemy 1, we should have a similar thing happen. So we don't want exactly the same. But what we can do is, again with this one, let's duplicate this event for the collision for enemy 2. The only thing that we're going to do is I'm going to adjust this to -5 because enemy 2 has 5 hits, and so I'm going to keep that consistent. The other thing I might consider, and I think I will do, is to go ahead and let's double the player's hits to 20, and so that they have, so that they don't die too quickly, and so that means in our health bar, we need to go ahead and change the hits from times 10 to times 5. So, now that I have all that done, let's see how this works and see what this looks like. We should notice that we should see 4 groups of enemy 1s and then a group of enemy 2s, and then kind of try to keep track of that as best we can, with the enemy 2s always firing. Okay. So, waiting. Here we go. So, here we go. So we got one group of enemy 1s, one next group of enemy 1s, another group of enemy 1s. There's a 4th group of enemy 1s. Now we should see a group of enemy 2s, which we did. Okay. Oh, it looks like, you know what we didn't do? We didn't fix that one. So that'll be an easy one to fix. Let's go to the control object. We didn't put the right number in, or didn't finish it, I guess. That's what it was. This needs to be -48. But other than that, everything works. So it would appear everything works. I'll do it again just to make sure, but it looks like everything is functioning properly. And we're all also set up for waves and levels and stuff. So we can also determine whether we end up having too many enemies on screen, because that might, because you notice that we have a bunch on screen, but we should see all the things happening here. Let's go ahead and collide just to make sure. Yep, there we go. And then we're dead. Oh, you know what I didn't do? What I need to do though, I need to go back to the player, and when we die in the step event, we need to reset the hits to 20. That's all. So, and we can also, there's also, we can also set that up differently. But for now, we've got everything we need for the moment.